Okay, so this is our presentation on COVID-19's impact on Amazon supply chain. I'm going to introduce myself, and then the other team members will also introduce themselves. So I'm Fabian Vega.
My name's Luke Navarrete.
And I'm Kobi Terronez.
And I'm Gavin.
Okay, so just a little background. COVID-19 is kind of the catalyst of this entire project we're doing here. So COVID-19 was a pandemic that started in Wuhan, China in December of 2019, and it spread to the US about a month later in January of 2020. In total, there have been around 400 million total cases of COVID and nearly 6 million deaths. And COVID has impacted the world in many ways. We've had to wear masks everywhere we go. We've had to have our vaccination cards to get into restaurants and things like that, and have proof of negative tests to go to concerts and different things. But the main effect that is sort of what our presentation is about is the fact that this pandemic had led to worldwide quarantines that lasted for months. And because of this, businesses had shut down and everyone had to stay home. There was no school, at least in person. So people couldn't go shopping for the things they needed in person. So everyone had to shift to using e-commerce to buy their essential items that they needed to survive. So the way this virus had affected Amazon specifically, which is pretty evidently the biggest e-commerce company, is the demand for essential goods through Amazon skyrocketed. Amazon's warehouses and the third-party sellers that sell through Amazon, they could not keep up with the number of orders being requested. People were just buying more things like toilet paper and masks and just things they needed to survive. And Amazon could not keep up with it. So they became capacity constrained because the demand was greater than the capacity that their labor and their machines could handle. So this created huge bottlenecks to the warehousing and order fulfillment stage of the supply chain. And this led to countless delays for the shipping of these goods. So people were left without the things that they needed.
So the issues surrounding COVID-19 certainly impacted Amazon a great deal. And Amazon being a massive company, a lot of people rely on them. It has a 41% market share in the e-commerce industry. These delays from Amazon caused millions to be left without essential supplies needing to survive during the pandemic, such as masks, toilet paper, food, and sanitizers. And these are products that weren't generally huge in the e-commerce industry. However, with COVID going on and the quarantines, people not feeling safe going to grocery stores, many more people were using e-commerce such as Amazon for these materials, and Amazon was not necessarily prepared for this change. Along with that, there was great tension among Amazon's warehouse workers and management. The workers had to work extensive shifts to help ease the burden of demand. Many people were forced to work overtime, and they were constantly bringing in new employees. Along with that, there was a massive risk for spread of COVID-19 amongst these workers because they still had to do their jobs in person. Not every job can be moved out to online. And Amazon's response to this pandemic was to put restrictions on non-essential items. This allowed them to fulfill more of the essential orders that were coming up as they took precedence in their warehouse space. This became a challenge for many of their suppliers because they just didn't have enough space. They couldn't stock or put in Amazon's warehouse enough products that were considered non-essential. However, this still had a very positive effect as it allowed Amazon to fulfill the majority of essential orders, and which became the most important part of the process for Amazon because they were trying to give COVID aid in any way possible. However, this did still affect massive losses for many of Amazon's third-party sellers, and there's a long way to go to create some sort of normalcy.
So now let's really focus on how the issue that Amazon's facing now or during the pandemic really relates to what we've learned in class so far. So I'm first going to define operations management, and that is the management of a process used to design, supply, produce, and deliver valuable goods or services to customers. Now, the pandemic caused Amazon to redesign their supply chain, caused them to reconfigure supply in relation to demand, and refocus the valuable goods that they deliver. Amazon's supply chain and processes during the COVID pandemic really provides a perfect example of how this course touches upon many topics that they now face and have been facing the last couple of years. So now let's broaden the view a little bit and look at the supply chain as a whole. So even though Amazon is an e-commerce based business, it does cut out a lot of the middlemen, such as retailers and wholesalers. But due to overreactive ordering and the natural disaster of COVID, it still created a pretty big blow-up effect. You know, it could be overreactive ordering by just the customers, but also the manufacturers of the many essential materials that Amazon required to fulfill their orders. So before the inventory was even became before the inventory even made it to the warehouses, a bottleneck process was beginning to form in the ports and subsequent transportation methods when it reached America. So idle time really skyrocketed during this time because containers couldn't be transported from the ships to the ground and the port to be transported onto the warehouses. So there really was no room physically for new ones to come in. The available demand was decreasing. The available time to meet demand due to this idle time was decreasing as demand was increasing, which really impacted takt time for this port process. And another contribution towards that was just a lack of workers due to employment shortages and transportation regulations. So now I would like to take a deeper dive into just some metrics that we've learned in class so far and how they relate to what Amazon has had to deal with and its manufacturers during this time. So manufacturers across the globe had to recalculate their average on-hand inventory and on-order inventory and adjust it to even the transportation costs due to delays. So they really had to reconfigure, what they have in their inventory and their manufacturing factories, and then as well as the materials that they need to bring in order to fulfill those orders. So let's take a look back at the port. The cycle time for each unit to get through the port and onto a warehousing to eventually get onto the customers, that really defines cycle time. And cycle time really increased because, again, it just wasn't able to move through quick enough. This means that the overall lead time of orders increased as well, because lead time is the time between when an order is placed and when it is received. The labor utilization of the warehouses were at 100% full capacity, full go, because the sheer number of orders. And that pinpointed really the big bottleneck that we discussed previous in this presentation. The cost of holding inventory became more prevalent among companies. Amazon wasn't alone in this, so they wanted to prolong the amount of time workers stay in and work in these warehouses and increase their operating hours to help combat this bottleneck in their warehouses.
So now let's focus on how Amazon could handle these supply chain issues. In order for Amazon to handle these supply chain issues, there are necessary steps that need to be taken. Amazon needs to maintain their high-level informational technology, an extensive network of warehouses, inventory management, and excellent transportation. Amazon is such a powerhouse company because of their quick and efficient supply chain. It is one of the main reasons why customers are so drawn to Amazon, especially during the pandemic, as there was this urgent need for all these certain supplies while third-party suppliers were struggling and not able to handle the upkeep of what was going on. So for first step Amazon could take is outsourcing of inventory. It frees up working capital, improves cost of goods sold, staff cost is low, faster order fulfillment, and a concentration on core business concepts and what we really need to get done in order to get back on track. So another step that Amazon could take to handling these supply chain issues is automation. Automation, especially with Amazon, they've invested a lot of money into these robotics that reduce cost, improve operational efficiency, minimize processing time, improve safety, and reduce factory lead time. So another beneficial thing of automation in Amazon factories is that the health and safety of employees during the pandemic was a big issue, as they're providing all these core products for people, especially in the pandemic, of safety. They want to make sure they're keeping their employees safe. And whether that's in main metropolitan areas, cities, or specific regions that are really hit with these high demand, that's a step that they're able to take. Let's go to the next. Another issue Amazon faced, as mentioned before, is customer preferences during the pandemic. So just a broad overview, it's customer preference can tell us about expectation, likes, dislikes, motivation, inclinations, and it drives customer purchase decisions. So that can better help Amazon prepare for what they need to have in inventory and what their demand is going to be looking like for certain products. We can go to the next one. So in order to help us with customer preference, we're going to want to invest in customer research. Customer preference is challenging alone because it's an attempt to predict people. But customer research is a process of gathering information about a prospective customer's need and desires so that businesses can provide services or products which will fulfill them. Through the pandemic, no one was really prepared for what was happening, but I believe that customer research through a tough time like this is going to help better Amazon know what to have in inventory and how to handle this high demand. Also, just changing customer preference, just overall to help inventory and operations.
All right, so thank you for listening. That was our presentation. I hope you found it informative, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.